Well, hello again and welcome in wherever you are today and wherever you're listening from. I'm so happy to have you over to feast upon God's Word together. Get your plate ready today and take a seat. It's the 44, which is Matthew 4:4. Man cannot live on bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Let's eat. I'm your host, Jed Yancey, and today we're going to continue our talk on counterculture that we started last week that stems from Matthew chapter 5 and Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. If you joined us last week and tuned into that, remember we are talking about what's inside of here is we have several of these lines that Jesus begins by saying, "You have heard that it was said." And Jesus dishing these out to this crowd that is listening as a way of saying, like, I know you know this, or I know you agree on this thing because that's what is written. But then he follows it up with something that is counterculture, something that goes against the grain, or we would say is upside down a little bit. And he begins what he says in that nature by using a three-letter word, but. And so much of what we said last week and we will be after again today are these things that, we sometimes forget in our dealings with people where maybe, we lose our minds at times or we lose our way at times and we fall right into the way where, I'm reacting to people, I'm dealing with people because that's the way I've always done it. Maybe it's the way that I just instinctually go about reacting to people or dealing with people. And yet here is Jesus saying, before we even get into all that we're looking at, to be counterculture, to be different, as we looked at last week, to be salt, be light, and don't do it from the standpoint of being a pushover or being soft, but you've heard it said one way, and I say to you, do it this way. Have this attitude about yourselves when it comes to people so that people will notice it, they'll see it, and it'll make God look good. So the first one that we'll look at today is in verse 40, and it stems off what we left off with last week, that you've heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But Jesus said, don't resist an evil person. And if someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other also. That was last week and where we left off. So here's verse 40 today. You ready for this? If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, let him have your coat also. Okay, so this one's kind of odd, first of all. Last week we said, all right, well, we're encouraged not to retaliate, but now Jesus, what you're saying is that I should return back to the one that is cruel to me some kindness. Like, what in the world are you even talking about, man? Now, like for us, we read something like this, and it's a big deal, but it's really not a big deal. Like I'm not sure about you. I am not trying to assume things here, but I'm going to assume something here, and that is that you're kind of like me, and I've got several jackets or coats that are hanging inside my closet. Like, this isn't really a problem for me. um, Giving someone my coat. But when you think about the context of this and the people he's speaking to and the when that this was said, in those days, people might have several articles of clothing, but typically they only had one coat. And that coat was a big deal. So much so that at the end of the second letter that Paul writes to Timothy, he writes about his coat. He tells Timothy, make every effort to come to me. And a part of what Paul wants Timothy to bring to him is the coat that he left with a man named Carpus at Troas. Kind of interesting, right? Now, to take this a step farther, Exodus chapter 22 actually makes some reference as to how big a deal it was for these people to have a coat, and how it was actually one of the most basic of human rights for a person to have one coat, and not just to wear it around as we do today, but to sleep in and sleep with. Like, listen to this. Exodus 22, beginning in verse 26. If you ever take your neighbor's coat as a pledge, you are to return it to him before the sun sets, for that is his only covering. It's his coat for his body. What else shall he sleep in? Now, I give you that to say this, that if that is one of the most basic human rights is to have a coat, then technically you would not have been able to sue someone for their coat because it's their right in the first place to have it. But here's where it gets really hard for them then and what we're reading of, and hard for us today. Following the way of Jesus and doing things as he encourages to do it different and to add some salt to it or be counterculture means that when it comes to dealing with people, sometimes it means letting go of my rights and letting go of those rights in order to shine the light and salt up the world and be different and be counterculture and ultimately make God look good. But you know what's more on this one? Like when we think about this in the context of today, is that if I'm being honest, I have no problem giving up one of my coats to someone I love, or even giving up one of my coats to someone who's in real dire need of it. Like I don't mind doing that. But remember the situation Jesus is speaking to here. Would you give up that thing you have the right to have for the very person that is suing you and is out to get you? Someone that has it out for me, I'm going to do something good back to them. You see, most of us, I think, would say that's where I draw the line. And so here's the first part of your 44 today. What if we changed our way of thinking, and instead of seeing someone as out to get us, or out to sue us, or out to harm me, or get something from me that's not theirs to begin with, what if instead of that, we see them as an opportunity to practice counterculture, to practice the way Jesus teaches? How's that for salty? How's that for bright lights? And how's that for making God look good? Number 2 is verse 41. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile with them, go with them 2 miles. Now, initially we hear this and we don't take this literally because we've heard it said before, go the extra mile. And to us, that just means like add some extra effort, do a little more than you normally would do, which I mean, honestly, I can get behind that. I can wrap my mind around that in a good way. That should be all of us. We can go the extra mile, but let me read this to you again, emphasizing the part that is counterculture. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2. I mean, here's where it is that it's a hard no for us, right? Like, I don't like to be forced to do anything, and you can't force me to do anything. Like, think of it this way. It's been a little bit since Megan and I have gone for a walk because she's starting to get really pregnant. But if she asked me to go on a walk, my response would be, sure, let's go walk. I would love to do that. But the minute she adds some force to it and forcefully urges me to go on a walk, what starts to happen? Yeah, sorry, not happening, babe. My pride starts to take over at that point, and I get a little on edge because her force on me implies she's trying to take hold over me, and I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen, right? Now, real quick, I'm not sure if you know this or not. I sure didn't, but after doing some reading, there's some important context that surrounds this one and why Jesus is even bringing it up. So you see, there was a law back then that Roman soldiers could force civilians into acts of service, but there were some limitations. For example, a Roman soldier could force a Jew to carry his pack for 1 mile, but not any farther than 1 mile. And so the Jewish person didn't really have an opinion in the matter. And so they would pick up the pack for this Roman soldier and they would carry it 1 mile, but not another step past that. They couldn't be forced into a 2nd mile. They could be forced into that 1st one. And so Roman soldiers, as most of you know, were the enemy that the Jew would have wanted to go eye for eye and tooth for tooth with, because they treated the Jews like dogs. So imagine the scenario where, the Jewish man is coming home from work and he's tired and he's hungry, but just before he gets home in time to hang out with his kids, to watch an episode of Seinfeld, to eat dinner with his family before going to bed, he sees a soldier on the side of the road and he thinks, great, man, this is the last thing I need. And the soldier stops him and throws his pack on the ground in front of the man's feet and says, hey, Jew, be a good boy now and carry this pack for me. Like, can you imagine the reaction of this guy? Like, he's angry, he's upset. He no doubt he doesn't want to do this. And as soon as he gets to the end of mile 1, because it's been forced on him, he drops the pack and he plods his way home. And what happens when he gets home? Like, if that's us, what would I do right when I walk in the door? Well, I'm going to moan. I'm going to complain. I'm going to be frustrated. I'm going to slam the door. I'm going to be short with the kids and short with my wife and spend the rest of the evening in an awful mood. But think about this for a second. What if this man in the same scenario gets to the end of the first mile and says to the Roman soldier, you know what? I know I don't have to go any farther, but I don't mind going a second mile if that would help you out. Now, it feels like, hearing that this man is giving up all the power. He is becoming a pushover. He is soft. But if you really think about this, would that be the response? Would that be what we say? And the answer is no, because it's completely counterculture. And in reality, this man is now actually taking some control back. Why? Because nobody's making him do it at that point. He is no longer under force or under compulsion to carry this bag. He might come home a little bit later than he planned, but as he walks in the door, he walks in with dignity. He walks in with his pride intact. All the while, he threw a little bit of salt, a little bit of light on the situation, and made his Father in heaven look really good. And then can I just add in on top of that, for your consideration, what you think the reaction of the Roman soldier is upon this man offering a second mile? What would that be like? What do you think his reaction would be to this Jewish man offering to go another mile? Like, speechless? Wouldn't have known what to say? Probably would have gotten to where he's going and told the other guys about it. Like, people would have noticed. You see, the second mile mentality is huge for us. And Jesus teaches us that even when that person is an enemy and he's making our life miserable and he forces us to do something, this is what we should do. So what does that look like today? I mean, considering the fact no one's going to walk up to me and throw a pack at my feet and say, hey, walk a mile. Travel, take my bags 1 mile, and me say, let's go too. So what does this look like today? Just a few things real quick off the top of my head. Someone insults you, say something nice to them. Your spouse criticizes you, you compliment them. Someone blames you, well, you bless them in return. Server is short with you, which happens sometimes. About in that situation, we give more generously than you would normally. You think people would notice that? And again, to go back to last week and a part of what we're talking about, to do that is to bless your life, their life, and in turn, it'll make God look good. It makes a huge difference. Last one here, verse 42. Give to the one who asks you, and don't turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. With this one, I just, in my mind, I go to the people that maybe you have some of these people in your life who always need something from you, and they're always asking for something. Like, you see them coming and you know exactly what's coming, or you see that that name pop up on your phone and you know what's coming. You know what story that they're going to have this time about what's wrong or what they want from you to help them feel better. They never seem to have anything to offer you or give you, but they are taking and asking and never giving anything back. How do we respond to that? I mean, seriously, how do you respond? Oh, well, geez, here we go again. Like, Megan, you need another favor? I mean, what are you, my wife or something? Like, you need something else. I mean, who are you, my fellow brother or sister in Christ? Let alone the context here is how to deal with an enemy. You see, our attitude when it comes to people asking of us, like, is so much like, just no. That's too much. You only get to ask of me, what, one time, two times, three times? It doesn't matter who you are, my brother or sister in Christ, my wife. You take too much from me and you give nothing back in return. That's a hard no, and that's where I draw the line. I mean, maybe I'm cool with this when it comes to those I know and those that are close to me, but still, even then, I have my max limit to how many things you can ask of me. And I guess to everyone else, it just kind of depends. I mean, as you consider these last 2 weeks, it's like this. We see all of this and we say, who does that? I mean, when it comes to dealing with people, when it comes to talking to people, who does that? Who gets hit and turns the other cheek? Who gets sued and hands over their coat? Who gets forced to go 1 mile and volunteers to go a second? I can see why it would make a difference, but who actually lives that way? Well, the very one that said it lived that way. Jesus lived that way. Not once, not twice, but always. I think Philippians 2 here is a great reminder that says that when we consider others better than ourselves and put their needs ahead of our own, we are following the example of the one Jesus who didn't just teach it, but did it, who made himself nothing and took on the very nature of a servant. You're 44 today. Here as we close. Guys, we got to resolve to be different. Are you a Christian? Be salty. Be bright, shine the light on God in the way that we interact with people. Be counterculture. You see, while I'd love to change the world through my reactionary responses and what I post on social media, well, I'd love to change the world by, again, giving into my instincts, offering up immediate retribution. That's just not the way that Jesus says to deal with people in our daily lives. And we have to resolve to be better and shine our light in the way that he taught us, the way that he showed us, and do it in a way that people don't just see you, but see your Father who is in heaven and come to a point of glorifying him. I love you guys. I thank you so much for listening today. And until next time, keep on eating.